Hello everyone, I'm back for another update. I'm now on the banks of Potts Creek over by the log bridge. It did get almost submerged yesterday. The waters have come down. I'm not going to cross it today though because it's very late in the afternoon. And you can see the floods and a lot more huge trees were deposited here when the creek flooded a month ago. But this log bridge across Potts Creek gives me access to the wilderness area back there in national forest land, and currently that is the only way to get across the side, walking up down the road at least a mile or more each way. So I'm gonna start heading back. There's a lot of trees I've got to here. I gotta get under. I get over this. These all were not here before the flood. This whole area got obviously inundated. But the beaver dam right here held. Climb over this big, huge log here. But yeah, the flood changed this little area, made it more favorable to get across now. All of this was deposited by the floodwaters, and it basically filled in this whole gully so that I could cross it easier now than before when the water's high. And there's where I just came from. And now I have to climb over the top of this debris here that was deposited, a lot of it by the flood. And you can see that hole there where the beavers live under here. I guess they use that as their entrance. And I basically rerouted my trail now because of the flood. It scoured all this out so that I made a path here now, right along the bank. So what I'm going to talk about today is, now that winter, meteorology speaking, has passed, there's a lot of talk that this was just a normal winter and global warming made it seem colder than it really was. And that Arctic amplification caused the polar vortex to go more south this year, giving the blizzard to Louisiana back in January, and bouts of very cold weather. But they definitely minimized the severity of this winter as to what it really was. I've been alive long enough to know a severe winter when I see one. And the difference between that and just a normal winter. I did predict a normal winter at the outset. This winter definitely, I wouldn't say is a record-breaking cold. It was not a record breaker in terms of cold, but it was a cold winter. Definitely was a cold winter. And these people who were pushing global warming, that it's never going to snow again. In many areas saw above average snowfall. Not all, but many did this winter, especially around the Great Lakes. And of course, that's another thing. They blame that on global warming, the excessive amount of snow around the Great Lakes this winter. They claim it's because the lakes are warmer. They didn't freeze because of global warming. Although Lake Erie, a couple weeks ago, was nearly 100% frozen because it's a shallow lake. And that gives you an idea, that we really did have a cold winter. In order to freeze almost all of Lake Erie, you would have to have a pretty cold winter to do it, especially after 3 mild ones. Of course, they come back, and here's a bear. It looks like a bear track. It looks like a bear or some larger animal had used my trail recently. But they're trying to say that the Great Lakes, of course, after 3 mild winters, even the coldest winter imaginable is not going to freeze or get the ice above normal. You need several cold winters in a row to do it. One cold winter isn't going to bring the ice in the Great Lakes above average. Even if it's a record-breaking cold winter, it's not going to bring the averages of ice above normal in the Great Lakes. You need several cold winters consecutive to do it. But they're saying because global warming is going on, the lakes are warmer because of record-breaking warm. Well, we had 3 winters in a row that were very mild. Of course, the lakes are going to be warm. It's not the first time it's happened. It's happened numerous times in the past where the Great Lakes have been, had several mild winters, and you got a cold one, and the lakes still don't quite all freeze and get up to normal. It takes some time because the lakes are very deep. But the fact that Lake Erie, which is shallower, completely froze. If we get another winter next year similar to this one, which I feel strongly we're probably going to, there's going to be a lot more ice on the Great Lakes. A lot more ice than this year. Of course, they blame Arctic amplification, saying that, oh yeah, the winter was cold, but it was the warmest January. Every month is the warmest on record anymore with these people. And I'm amused by the maps that I look at, anomaly maps that show the only place in the northern hemisphere that had cold weather was North America. There's no way, physics, that just can't happen. If it was cold in North America, it was likely cold in a lot of other areas of the northern hemisphere as well. In a lot of in different places. There's no way the northern hemisphere could be the only place that it seems like winter picked on the United States this year. No. Japan had record amounts of snow, which again they blamed on global warming, more moisture in the atmosphere. Expansion of the polar vortex southward, they blamed that on global warming, but that happened in the 70s and they blamed it back then on global cooling. But we were being told a lot more of the truth in the 70s than now. And now, and there's another one of those animal tracks. And now, NASA admitted that we have passed the solar max and activity is likely going to start declining on the sun, which I talked about months ago on this channel, that the sun had rounded the corner and had maxed out. So I did also talk on my last video about the polar vortex being disrupted later in March. That's still on. And probably around the equinox, there's going to very likely be another period of perhaps even wintry weather coming. So look at the size of this tree that fell that was back over the summer. Helene knocked this tree down, several trees down here. But they did not block my pathway. During the flood, the water came through here, scoured all of this area out, scoured out all the leaves. It's all bare ground now here. A lot much easier to traverse than before. So you can see there was a channel of water that came through there, and then water didn't really touch here very much. It's up a little bit higher. But getting back to my discussion, the polar vortex is going to return the last third of March, and it could even bring snow to the East Coast, perhaps even. And the threat will remain in place until probably into April. Again, it's a threat. It doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but the weather is going to turn colder again. And now with the sun declining, I mean, I looked this morning, it was 127 sunspots, I think it was, but I only saw maybe 4 regions that had spots that actually were visible spots. So really, you can probably cut that 127 in half, or even less than that, and that's what we really have right now, below 100. So it's going to have implications for the hurricane season. It may not even have much of a season this year. I know everybody's going to be saying another active season. The Gulf is definitely tapped out now. That's why we are having such a hard time getting severe weather this year. I know there's a lot of talk of severe weather, but actual severe weather, so far we've not had very much of, because the Gulf is cold from all that winter weather they got back in January. It cooled the Gulf down, the northern part of the Gulf. Cooled it down to the 40s and 50s. So that removes a lot of the ammunition needed for severe weather. Of course, they could try to manipulate it and try to create severe weather, but without the ammunition, it's just like with hurricanes. As I've discussed in the past on my channel, they're using technology because there's been a long-term decline, because climate is not getting warmer anymore, and they're trying to keep this agenda going. There's billions of dollars tied up in it. Old liquor bottle washed down. So it's yeah, yeah, it's going to have implications for the hurricane season. If the sun quiets down, we're going to have a very inactive year. The waters of the oceans are already tapped out of their excess heat, and you need excess heat to get hurricanes. I know that's not what the anomaly maps show, which is why they're laying off people. We're not being told the truth about actual climate trends. We're not being told the truth about what actually changes climate. I mean, I've been doing more research, and I had touched on, for example, the transition between ice ages and interglacial periods, and I've been doing more research, and Greenland ice cores indicate that when we came out of the last ice age, the climate flipped in a matter of not even a decade. Global temperatures rose by 10°C in barely a decade. Of course, some people say it's a Milankovitch theory. I think it goes further than that. The Milankovitch theory is a very gradual process of changes over tens of thousands of years in the Earth's orbit, distance from the sun, tilt of the axis. There's no way the Milankovitch theory can explain a 10° C rise over in less than a decade of global temperatures. I hold to it that the sun is responsible. Some kind of cycle in the sun that's very long term that causes the sun to change its output abruptly, or change gears, puts us in an ice age, or brings us out. And again, I touched on that solar scientist. As you can see, the trail here is kind of swamped. But the solar scientist I had been following felt that solar cycle 26 was going to be the beginning of a shutdown for the sun, where it would go into a different mode and bring us into an ice age, and that the change in the climate, a drop in global temperature, would come within 10 to 20 years, he said, into full ice age from what we are now. Of course, some people say volcanism could have caused it, ice ages, and then they talk about the Younger Dryas 12,000 years ago, where the climate started coming out and temperature abruptly dropped again for another 1,000 years back to ice age in a very short time. Again, in a very short time. It's a matter of years, not centuries. And you're talking to all this global warming, 1.5°C rise, like panicking over it, and it hasn't even really happened, of course, but that's nothing compared to what changes happened in the past that were likely due to, I feel, significant changes in solar output, significant changes in solar cycles and output over very long terms of time that we don't fully understand. I put a few logs down here to try to get me across this wet spot here, and this is a beaver dam. And yes, apparently mankind did survive these ice ages. There were civilizations in place. They just lived on the shorelines that had the sea levels were over 400 feet lower than now, because all that water got locked up in the ice. And when we came out of the ice age, because the climate was warmer than now, sea levels were perhaps as much as 8 feet higher than today, because a lot of the ice in Greenland, or some of it, melted off for a time, and even Antarctica. So the spring peepers did come out a couple days ago when we hit 70 degrees, but now they're went back into dormancy because last night was down below freezing. So they're not out anymore. I'm pretty sure they'll be back out next week when it warms back up here. But we do have some cold weather tomorrow night, so last year they were out by March 1st, so it's a little later this year. But getting back to the sun, I feel that it's abrupt changes in the sun that ultimately cause long-term changes in output that cause ice ages. That's how I feel. And the changes are very abrupt according to the ice core records that they've pulled up out of Greenland, especially, that indicate that climate change can be very rapid and catastrophic by today's standards. The little ice age was nothing in comparison to what it would be like plunging into a full ice age. So that's going to be it. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you enjoyed this walk back through the wetlands and Long Potts Creek. I will be back soon.